Hello, welcome to Making Mannequin Heads into Planters, episode 50-something. How are you? Good to see you. It's been a good few days here, and I just wanted to get back into using Sculpt Crete actively. So today is going to be simply doing one batch of Sculpt Crete and putting a base coat on, roll up my sleeves, on the smaller head. Oh gosh, that's too much. My arm's gonna fall off. My hand's gonna fall off if it's that tight. Oh, there we go. Very good. All right, no bibs. But you know what I found? Bum, 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 bum. I found my latex gloves. Hallelujah. So that's very exciting, even though they will make my hands smell like latex for the rest of the day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do Sculpt Crete, works like clay, hardens like concrete, Sculpt Crete. So we're going to do this where it's a 3-to-1. So I'm only going to do the small line on this container of the powder, and then for 3 of these, and then 1 of these for water. And I found out last time that I need more than just 1 of these for water. So I'll put in as much as I need to make it really into a good malleable substance. All right, I'm gonna do this away from myself because I didn't have a mask right here, and I don't think I need one. I've been vacuuming this surface religiously, trying to keep all the foam pieces, and I vacuumed out the heads. So the last thing that we did was we cut off the tops. That was very fun. Hollowed out the insides and drilled holes, creepy, in for drainage. So we're going to do this where we do the undercoat of the entire thing. And I'm going to see if I can get that done in one batch of this. We will see how much I need. The beauty of it that I found is that if you just spray it after it's already been put on there, you can then just work right over it. So you don't have to do it all in one shot, which is awesome. Let me tell you, what a relief. I was telling my pottery teacher about it, Junk Pot Studios, Tony over there, and I mentioned, what I was working on in the videos and things, and he's very intrigued with his students. He's a high school art teacher, and he was like, oh, I could use that with my students. I wonder how that would go. And I was like, actually, that's a brilliant idea with the Sculpt Crete. I don't know how cost effective that might be, but it would be kind of a cool different medium to try out for hand building instead of clay, because you can just mix as much as you want. You don't have to keep the clay, I don't know if clay has like a half-life, but it makes you sort of, as we're finding out, it makes me get done with what I'm working on. It gives you a time limit. There's number 2, and here's number 3. Looks like it's smoking. Pretty fine stuff there. Keep it away from myself. Yeah, that's 3. Don't bum bum bum. Get all of that in there. Let's seal this puppy back up. And I do want to keep it sealed because it is a chemical reaction. It's a cement reaction. And with that chemical reaction, if it's just moisture in the air, eventually it does set up. So if you've ever had and it's just 3-to-1, 3 powder to 1 water. So here we go. I'm just going to dump all the water in there. I'm going to grab some extra water. There's actually a little bit of powder left in there. And I'm just going to put on my gloves. Sorry, I almost forgot. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've got powder all over my hands now. Probably not the greatest thing to have on my hands. It's going to dry them out. It's going to suck all the moisture out just like with clay. I'll be putting on some moisturizer later so that my fingers don't crack. So here's the fun part of putting these gloves on. One size fits all. And what's beautiful, look at that. Look, I can use my fingertips. That makes me very happy compared to those other horrible nylon gloves. Ugh, I know, and you're going to be happy not hearing me whining about those all the time. All right, there we go. And here goes the glove. The whole process of putting on gloves. So just be careful when you're putting on latex gloves. And some people can't, like Shawneen, my sister Shawneen, is like deathly allergic to latex. Like, holy shit, allergic to latex. So be careful not to get latex gloves if you can't wear them. I know that's kind of a dumb thing, but think about that. You never know if you've never been around latex and latex gloves and stuff, then do a little test. Make sure you're not wearing them, and then the next day your hands are completely red and blistering and having all this horrible reaction to it. Okay, so not my fault if you do. But fair warning, be nice to yourself, be good to your hands and other parts of your body that you may have touched with latex. And do a little test, because there are people out there randomly who are allergic to it, like seriously allergic to it. Okay, so be careful. All right, mixy. All I'm doing is, so you can see what I'm doing here, doing a nice mixture. I just put my fingers in there, get it going, get it goopy, and 3 to 1 is working out beautifully for the mixture. Get all in those corners, pull it all down, get it. I'm just mixing it between my fingers. This is a pretty wet mix this time. I think I didn't quite have as much dry in there, but want to get all of that dry incorporated, because it does make a big difference. So the corners, I'm finding some dry parts in there, and that's actually firming it up a little bit. You do want to start on the wetter side, finding out with working this last few times, I guess. Really, a couple batches is all I've really done so far. But if you don't start wetter, it's harder to add water to it later. Not harder, but it's probably just a better idea to have a little bit wetter on this side, this end of it, since it will be curing the entire time that you're working with it. You're gonna only have 30 minutes to an hour. That's a big difference, right? So really 45 minutes to a maximum of an hour to work with it. It says that it's less than that, but I found that it definitely is more than that, especially if you're really working it. It's more on the 45-minute end of it, and getting to an hour is really actually pushing it. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to put a coating of the Sculpt Crete on here. I'm just going to slather it on. So this batch is so much wetter than the other one, where I had to really, take it by piece and really apply it like clay. So let's try this a little bit wetter and see how it does. If I'm not happy with it, I'm just going to put a little bit more powder in, and I can mix it a little bit heavier. So I want to make sure it's actually sticking to the styrofoam by pressing it on it to make sure that it's not going to be coming right off. And you'll find that, as you're pressing it, let's try not to get it on. Of course, I'm wearing pants from work because I was so excited just to come down and do an episode that I didn't get changed. Yeah, so it's working. It's interesting because it'll move, and then when it gets stuck down, it feels stuck down. So that's very good. This is going much faster than the other way that I did it. Learning curve is good. So now, when you do it, you don't have to go through the learning curve that I just went through. Although experimenting, seeing what you prefer. Maybe you prefer to put it on like clay, piece by piece. That's also it's an interesting, fun way to put it on. That's for sure. Now, around the eyes and the nose, I want to keep the shape of the face as much as I can, because remember, this is a base coat, so I'm going to be structuring the face over this. I can always add, but with this stuff, I cannot take away unless I sand the heck out of it. So I want it to be a lighter coat throughout. I can always add later, and this is going to make it so that I can build onto it as I want. I don't want to obliterate, however, the features that are here. It's good to use them as a guide. As I've mentioned before, you get sort of proportion ideas. This is a smaller head, so we want to keep an idea of where the nose is, where the mouth is, and yet still get a good coverage for this base coat. There we go. Get underneath the nose, get in those eye sockets, let them be lower, get around the lips. I've got a little spot here. You can see that. Just put it right on there. Little bald spot, put it right on. Doesn't need to be thick, just covering. All right, here we go. Very good. Now, I'm not going to smooth this. I don't need to. I mean, I probably could. Oh, I can smooth it. It doesn't really smooth though. I think the only way that you could really smooth this is if you really wet your fingers and let it dry significantly, or at least quite a bit, and then wet your fingers, maybe spray it, and put some on there. Put your fingers across it, rub your fingers across it, wipe them, and you could really give some better force against it while doing that than you can when it's this wet. To smooth it down. So for me, I'm just patting it down and it's going well. It's not coming back up because I pressed it down onto, oh my God, I got another piece on my leg, jeez Louise. So it's wet. I'm gonna get it back further so that I'm not holding it over my lap, which is why I'm doing this. So I want to definitely get the cement in the hole, but I don't want to block the hole. Be careful not to block the hole that goes in for drainage, but coat it. Coat the walls with the cement. Doesn't need to be thick, but what it's going to do is it's going to reinforce it. There we go. See the goop coming out of the face? It's such a weird statement to make, but it's what's happening. So here we go, down around the chin. Keep applying on here. And this is good. This is very good. So this is awesome. So I was thinking about y'all the yesterday. I think it was I was going to say the other day. I think it was just the yesterday, and And I was just thinking about something I could share with you guys. And so we've talked about the fact that, you know, I sang opera for a long time, for many, many years. I teach, I've taught voice for a few decades now, which is amazing to me to think that it's been, literally, I'm 52, so I've been teaching since I was about 25. Privately, and I love teaching. I'm actually rather good at it. I tried teaching in schools. Yeah, that's definitely not my jam. I 100% respect teachers who are in schools, because I sure as heck can't do that. I'm not really a babysitter of children, or you know, sort of that kind of a thing. I like it when I'm teaching music of any kind, teaching voice or whatever, teaching performance. It's a very different thing. Teaching performance from just teaching voice. It's more coaching, and that's coaching songs. There's a whole bunch of different aspects of it. But sort of the teaching thing of teaching in schools is so much of just sort of trying to keep the peace with the kids. Whereas if I've got performance or not performance, but like a lot of issues dealing with a kid or an adult for that matter, but the kids were really the biggest challenge at times. In the private lessons, they can go home. And I've talked to the parents of my children, of my students, who will always be my students, no matter how old they get. And I've had it where I've spoken to them before, and I said, they're unmanageable today, let's reschedule. Or I say, they're unmanageable today, we'll wait till the next lesson to see how manageable he or she is. And it's not a bad thing. It just is what it is. A lot of students in the arts are brilliant, and they're sort of misdiagnosed, if you will, mislabeled as being, ADHD, or they may be ADHD, but that's actually where the artistry comes in, where that attention span is short, but it's because there's all this brilliant stuff happening inside the head. I can relate to that. My thing is a hyper focus that I always had, where it's like I'd be focusing on something. I'd practice for 5 hours during the day, and I was adamant that nothing else would happen, that's where I was. I was in a practice room when I was at University of Maine, and I would literally be in there not wanting to go to classes, skipping classes, because all I wanted to do was practice. That was my whole world, because I was learning, and I absolutely adore learning, but music is one of those things where you never stop learning. I learn every time I open my mouth now. Even I learn about what my voice is doing now and with this body, and how to sing and how to perform and present anything musically, because my body's constantly changing. So I try to, that's what I teach as well, is how to utilize the instrument that you have, which is your entire body. It's also, focused, of course, in the voice, but your whole body contributes to it, the whole mechanism. So your body's changing. And as you age, your body changes. So you've got to adapt to the aging voice as well as the aging body around it and all of that. So, but yeah, so I was really hyper focused and would be, wanting to do one thing and not be called away from it, not have to do anything else, not get, took me quite a while to really mature into the idea. I was a late maturer this way, with the concept of how things worked complementary to one another. I had one professor, thank goodness, in college, who sort of did that, bridged the concept of, in music history, this was what was going on, and in the rest of the world, and this was the key for me, because I love literature as well. My undergrad is actually in literature. It's in German languages and literature, with a focus in German language and literatures. And but that professor was a professor at UMKC who said, University of Missouri, Kansas City, before I stopped going and ended up just singing professionally, who said, in the rest of Europe, this was what was going on historically. This war was going on. This was happening globally, and this was where the United States was, which was a freak out moment. That was one of the coolest things. It's how the history of the world around not only influenced the history of music, obviously, but how differently things developed. While all this brilliant stuff, if you just study music history in a bubble, it's really kind of hard to relate to. But once you put it in context of the rest of the world, so Mozart, was composing from these dates to these dates. He died on this date, and Mozart, while Mozart was doing this in the United States, which was, was it the United States back then? What was happening on this continent? What was happening in what we now call Russia? Or, the Soviet, when was there a Soviet Union? Who was composing during that? What styles of music was it? Blah, blah, blah. All of that. So as soon as that sort of aha moment happened for me, I was suddenly engaged. That's a good teacher who figures out how to bring a subject into a relative, help make it relative to and sort of overlap with the rest of your life or the rest of your knowledge base. And he was absolutely brilliant. I can't for the life of me remember his name. I think it was at UMKC. Pretty sure it was. But anyway, I do remember that was kind of my aha moment of going, ooh, this is doing very well. Very, very, very good. I'm very pleased with this. I like the wetter. Definitely like the wetter. SculptCrete. It's easy to put on. It's easy to flatten out. I lost the throat hole. There we go. Easy peasy. Just use the little tool, get that out of there, and push it back through, and that works just fine. Look at that. I can flop that right on here. Yeah, so anyway, so I really have always enjoyed teaching, but the learning part is also really has always gotten me excited in different ways for different types of learning. It was those professors who figured out how to communicate with me at a place where I could understand. And that's always my goal with teaching. So, and my students hear this, and I may have mentioned this to you before, but, and I think I have, but my philosophy for teaching is not one that any of my teachers ever had, although some of my teachers did embody it, but they never said it in a simple way. And I say it in as simple a way as possible to my students, that my students have a responsibility that if they don't understand something, I need them to tell me that they don't get it. And it's not a reflection on them being dumb or not being able to figure stuff out. On the contrary, it's 100% reflection, because it's my job to teach. And if you don't get it, my responsibility is to help you get it, to figure out a way that you'll understand it. And so many teachers that I had, I'm not quite sure why they were into teaching, other than that they weren't, I don't know, there was always this philosophy that, oh, if you're teaching, you're not good enough to be a performer, which is bullshit. But there were teachers who were really good teachers that I had, and then I had really bad teachers who were not bad people. They just kind of sucked as teachers, but they were still doing it. And it was unfortunate because their philosophy, a lot of my teachers, the ones who really sucked the most or the worst, were the ones where they would teach and it was kind of like, well, if you don't get it, you don't get it. And that was it. It was kind of like, well, that's a reflection on you as a student that you don't get it. It's like, well, I'm working my ass off to try to figure this out. I'm overwhelmed by all of these other things, right? And I'm putting the work in, but I still don't get it. So you, as a teacher, have the responsibility to help me find it, to help me get it. That's what your job is. That's your whole freaking job. So if you're coming at me saying, oh, you don't get it, you know, implying you're dumb or you're not talented enough, or you somehow are a failure as a result as a student, well, that's bullshit. In my excuse my language, but I'm very, very passionate about this subject because the teacher's job is to teach. The teacher's job is to do whatever the teacher can do to help the student learn when they put in the time and the effort. That is what a teacher does. And so if I come back at you when you say you don't get it, and I say, and I use the same words, oh my God, this was one of my pet peeves in school, all levels of school. Well, like I said, it's this, and use the same freaking words. I'm like, oh my God, you're a terrible teacher. Go away. If you, as a teacher, don't use different words every time that you explain something to a person who doesn't get it, then you are failing as a teacher. And I know that's harsh to say, sounds harsh to say, but it's actually absolutely true. And I know teachers who make a lot of effort, but still suck at teaching and need to learn how to teach better. The reason I'm an excellent teacher and the reason that my students have great results is because I take it on as 100% as my responsibility that if my student doesn't understand, it's my responsibility to figure out a way to help them understand. That's it. That's my whole job, right? I'm an expert in my field. Therefore, my job is to help my students figure out how to do. That's it. Singing is a doing thing. Music is you don't just sit and read a book and suddenly you can magically sing. You know, people are always like, oh, how do you sing so well? I'm like, practice. How do you think I sing so well? I've worked my ass off. And yes, there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of whatever organic ability. I was born with pipes. And I developed them. I worked my butt off. I worked my voice. I worked my musicality. I worked on how to, and I had really good teachers who may not have been really good for vocal technique, but they were really good at sculpting, helping you figure out how to, I guess sculpting is a common term here, but how to craft a song. That was huge. That for me, was why I got a lot of jobs, because I may not have had the biggest voice, but boy, I can sing beautifully. And that got me a lot of jobs. And I had people telling me literally that, and I've mentioned this before, is that, well, you know, you don't have the biggest voice, but you had the most beautiful interpretation of the song. Or you know how to use your instrument so well to make it sound easy when we know that it's not. It's really, really not. So anyway, so as a teacher, my job, and you know, what happens is it helps me become a better singer when I get to teach people, and when I change my tactics constantly, when I don't change what I'm teaching, I change how I'm teaching for my students, which is why I teach privately, because teaching privately allows me to do that. And that is why I don't teach in institutions, is because I found I could not do that in the institutions. They're just not built, or the ones that I worked in at least were not, and it didn't last long because I figured it out pretty damn quick, not built really for the teachers to be able to do their jobs extremely well. Now, I'm not saying every institution is like this, so don't get me wrong. I'm not poo-pooing institutions, because I mean, it was through institutions that I became, you know, enabled me to become a professional opera singer. But what I am saying is that the systems make it very, very difficult, let's put it this way, for those excellent teachers to really, really communicate, get in deep with their students. And it kind of allows those teachers who are meh oftentimes to just sort of slip through and not focus on their students and not take on the responsibility of teaching every single one of their students, because they've got so many other freaking things that they have to be responsible for that are just distractions, or, you know, become challenges that they shouldn't have to deal with. So that's my view on it. I'm sure y'all have like a lot of different views on it. You know, you don't have to agree with me, obviously. You probably don't, many of you don't agree with me, because your experiences are going to be different. But I can only speak from my experience over the past, well, 25 years, 27 years of teaching and singing. And I really do enjoy it. I love it. It's super satisfying. And I love the challenge of a student who just doesn't get it, because that's my job, is to help them figure it out. And then we have those aha moments where it's just like, oh my God, finally, you know, from both sides, it's like, all right, good. They get it. They have an aha moment, or something clicks that we worked on before, and it's suddenly like, look, oh my God. That's why with my teachers, I'm always giving them the feedback of, oh my God, when you said this, it did this. I suddenly understood, because that feedback to a teacher is everything, because then you know, oh, hey, that worked for somebody, instead of sort of, you know, teaching into the void of, well, I don't know if it's working. It seems to be, you know. But getting that feedback is so awesome to hear. You know, this worked for me. I heard this. I understood it when you said it this way. It's like, oh, good. All right, so let's build on that. Let's go forward with that. Let's see if that is then the approach to take moving forward for becoming better and better at what we do, and practicing well, practicing beautifully. So, yeah, time, 28 minutes. All right, so I got to use the rest of this up, and then we're going to be done with this session. I told the guys I'd be upstairs in 20 minutes. I lied as usual. I didn't lie, I just kind of got going. So anyway, so that's my philosophy in teaching and my experience. Like I said, I can only tell you what my experience has been, how much I absolutely love it, how much I've gotten from it over the years, and how satisfying, completely satisfying it can be, and really, really rewarding to see students. I'm very proud of my students. I'm very possessive of my students. Like I said, my students, you know, even if I taught them when they were little, they're still my students. And I don't take credit for their successes by any means, because it is all their work. What I do is I'm very proud of them no matter what they've accomplished. If they're still working in music, or if they're singing karaoke and they're happy as hell because they can now sing karaoke and be confident in that, whatever level they're at. In languages, if they went and they were like, yes, I studied with you to be able to go to Germany and, you know, actually feel comfortable and confident to be able to read a few signs here and there, know my numbers, ask how do I get to the bathroom, and because we worked together, there was a confidence level there that would not have happened if it was just out of a book, which, you know, or Duolingo or something like that, which are, for me, actually very hard to use. I've used them significantly, but I think they're a very slow way of learning. Languages you got to do. It's just like music. It's a physical thing for me. Maybe that's just because I'm a musician and a singer, that language to me is an interactive thing. And interacting on a database is not getting the feedback that works for me linguistically. And classes are hard, but you got to put a lot of time into it. So anyway, so that satisfaction with and feedback from students. I'm very possessive, like I said, of my students, or I guess not possessive as much as, like, I love them to study with other teachers. I absolutely actually am one of those few teachers who really encourages that, because I have studied with a lot of different teachers, and from each of those teachers I have been able to come away with something extremely useful. So I've had teachers who had really crappy vocal technique, but they were amazing, as I mentioned before, amazing at crafting songs. And even though the technique sucked for how to produce sound, I came away as a student being able to not only craft songs, but teach other people how to do it as well. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without those teachers. So my whole thing is, for my educational whatever, I try always to come away with, as you know, from a learning experience and teaching experiences, with what can I take from this experience that will serve me in the future. I know that they could have done better at this, the teacher could have been better at this, or I still didn't get it, not the fault of the teacher at that point because I didn't communicate well enough, blah, 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 whatever. And not dwell on those things that I didn't get or that I didn't do. Acknowledge them, obviously, because then I need to work on them and I need to find a different way of working on that. But instead focusing on and from that teacher or from that experience, I learned this. And therefore, I am better at this because of that experience. And then if you recognize and appreciate and don't take for granted those experiences, suddenly when you're learning, you go back to it and you go, yes, I learned this from this source. I can pass that on. Or I learned how not to do something from this source, and I can pass that on as well. Because it didn't work for me, or I found that it was actually harmful, like vocal techniques. The teachers who had terrible technique for me, for my voice, from whom I learned how not to sing. I know it sounds strange, but it's a valid thing, you know? You can learn how to do things, and then you can learn what to stay away from if the experience just does not work for you, or if it's not healthy. And that served me well as well. It's harder lessons, for sure. But here we go. All right, looky there. This is so wet. It's interesting. It's still very wet up here. And what I'm working with is starting to set up down below. So there we go. We've got a nice, light, thin undercoat, base coat. It was just not enough to get every single inch or square millimeter of this, but I did get up and inside. I can tip that for you. So I got inside there, around the rim, and try to just smooth that down a little bit. I like that lip like that. I'll do another batch. What I'll probably do is I will I actually am going to do another batch in another next session, and I will, because I'm over in time now, and I'm going to leave it alone, and I'll finish out the base with the next batch on another day, and I am going to actually put it on the inside of this one and the other one. All right, well, I hope you have a fabulous day. Have fun with the SculptCrete if you're trying it. Like I said, I bought it on Amazon. It was not expensive. It was easy to order because I could not find, you know me, I like to try to, if you've listened to me this far, you know I try to do, to order from local, or to get from local at least, and nobody had it locally. So I had to order it online. But I encourage you to try it out and have fun with it. And you have a wonderful day. Give yourself lots of room, lots of space. As you know, as I keep on harping on, we don't give ourselves enough room. We're very hard on ourselves and we're hard on other people. So when somebody says something that really triggers you, big breath in, let it out, and then see if your perspective has changed a little bit, all right? So put a bunch of love out in the world. There's not enough love in the world. Thank you, Sir Elton John. I agree with you 100%. And have a wonderful day. Bye.